So we've already talked about Dynamesh. So if you remember down here under Tool Geometry, we have Dynamesh turned on. We can control the resolution. And as you go through here and you start, using your move brush to start pulling down maybe a neck out of here. And we go in here, turn on polyframe or Shift F. You can see, okay, we're pulling down a neck. And if we want to pull out some shoulders, we can start doing that. But you're going to see the more I pull this geometry, the more skewed that geometry is going to get. It doesn't interpolate on the fly. In order to do that, you control drag out here. Now, you may notice also if you control drag out here, it's saying, hey, you do want to mask this. We'll get into masking later. For now, just control drag out in your document away from your object. If you accidentally control on your object, or control drag on your object, I should say, turn off our polyframe, that's going to mask. So if you go through here and you use your standard brush, it's going to mask. You can control drag in your document again to unmask, and then control drag again to run Dynamesh. So if you accidentally control drag and mask on your object, that's how you unmask and then Dynamesh. But back to Dynamesh here. So we know how to Dynamesh, we can pull geometry out, and as long as we control drag, it'll continue to update. However, there's another option we can use. If you look up here next to the gizmo, so when you're using the gizmo, you hit W and that turns the gizmo on, and this has move, scale, and rotate all together. I think we touched briefly on hitting Y to go into transpose mode. We'll get to that later. So we'll hit go ahead and hit Y, and right next to this button here, which turns that gizmo, or toggles the gizmo to transpose, there is if you hover over this is Sculptris Pro mode. You're going to see the hotkey for that as backslash on your keyboard. So let's talk about that. So we can go over here, I'm going to turn on draw mode or hit Q on my keyboard. And if we turn on polyframe, just so we can see what we're doing, and I'm going to take this material, turn this skin shader 4 so we can see it a little bit better. So we've gone through here and we've extended this out and we've controlled drag so we can continue Dynameshing. But like I said before, that's not going to update the geo on the fly. If I go in here to BSH and I want to say pull an arm out, or even better, you can go in here to BSS, snake hook sphere. You can use this to pull appendages out. Of course, this particular brush really appreciates Sculptris Pro. And what that is, if you go up here and you just turn this on for this brush. So we have a snake sphere brush selected, we have Sculptris Pro selected. So when I drag this out, you're going to see as I drag out, the mesh continuously updates. As I'm dragging, it's just adding new geometry as I go. So I can just continue dragging around and just creates more and more new geometry. And if I back out, you can see this is the result I'm getting. Now, if we go to BSH to go back to our snake hook brush, you'll see with Sculptris Pro on, instead of just pulling out and then eventually tapering off and skewing the geo, so if we turn Sculptris mode off and we just kind of pull out, you're going to see this geo right here just kind of stretches and then eventually stretches to a point. With Sculptris Pro mode on, it'll kind of go to a point where you're going to see as I drag it out, it's automatically interpolating this geometry. So this is another alternative to, instead of using Dynamesh, you can go through here and you can use Sculptris Pro to go through and add geometry. And in fact, if we go in here, like say to our inflate brush, and go back to the hotkeys button if you want to know how to quickly switch to the inflate brush. This is global, so Sculptris Pro mode stays on. So now when I inflate, as I'm inflating, it's automatically interpolating that geo. It's giving me new geometry to use. I can go in here to the move brush. Now the move brush, you're going to see it has Sculptris Pro grayed out. So there's a couple of limitations. One of those is you can't use the move brush. However, like we said before, snake hook brush is actually a pretty good move equivalent. So you can go through here and use this as a move brush if you need to and still have that capability of automatic geo creation. However, even with the snake hook brush, if I go down here to say brush, auto masking, and turn on like back face mask, you're going to see it's going to gray out. Or mask by polygroups, it's going to gray out. Or, and we haven't gotten here yet, we hold down Control Shift and we have select rectangle selected and we hide a piece of our mesh and we try to use Sculptris Pro. It'll try and it'll appear, it'll say, oh, mesh is partially hidden, Sculptris mode disabled, and it turns it off. So in that case, you gotta go turn that back on. So it does have some limitations, mostly around auto masking features that ZBrush has built in. Now you may have noticed As I was making my brush size bigger or smaller, so I go over here and make my brush size big and I use a snake hook brush, you're going to see the geometry actually interpolates larger. If I make my brush size small and start using it, you're going to see it affects less area, but it also makes my geometry much smaller. In fact, if I zoom in here and make my brush size very small, you're going to see I get very, very dense geometry. So Sculptris Pro mesh density is controlled by how big your draw size is. You're also going to notice when I have Sculptris Pro off, my cursor is red. When I turn it on, it's purple, so that's a visual indication that you're in Sculptris Pro mode. And if I hold down Shift, the cursor's orange. With this off, Shift turns it blue. So while you're in Sculptris Pro mode, there's a couple visual indicators. Number one, cursor's purple when you're using this. If you hold down Shift and use it, it'll turn orange. And you're going to see if I just smooth over the mesh, depending on how big my brush size is, it'll go through and it's basically tessellating this geometry. If I make my brush size smaller, just tap S and bring this down, or just go up here and grab this draw size, and then you shift smooth over your object, you're going to see you're actually adding more geometry in the area that you're smoothing. In fact, if you hold down Shift, drop your Z intensity down to 0 and start smoothing, it's not really going to affect your mesh. You can push down as hard as you want, but it will go through and retessellate your geometry. So if you want to spot tessellate your geometry, you can make your brush size whatever size you'd like, hold down Shift, and just turn your Z intensity down to 0 on your smooth brush, and that'll go through and tessemate this geo. So if you just want to add a little bit of local detail in here, you can hold down, make your draw size small, hold down Shift, smooth out just that area, and then go in and sculpt where the area has much denser meshes. Now, of course, you can also literally just turn on your standard brush with Sculptris Pro, use a small brush size, and you're able to go through here and do very, very fine sculpting. So here it is with me using Sculptris Pro. Now you may see like a little hitch in the geometry where essentially when you're using Sculptris Pro, it's going to look for a vert that it can start tessellating from. So if you don't have one, in fact, there's another use case for this. If you go into just a really quick site exploration, we're going to go in here to Z plugin Decimation Master. We're going to hit pre-process current. It's going to look at my geo, and you're going to see it's going to process this overall geo. So if we go down here and turn our polyframe back on, and we go back in here to Z plugin, we've hit pre-process. All we have to do is we can go in here to K polys, and we can type in like 10 and hit enter. This will decimate down from 300,000 points to, we put in 10, so we're going to go ahead and say decimate current. There we go. Now we have 10K polys. Now, this is a little bit low. You can see we lost a little bit of detail. The good news is, underneath Z plugin, you don't have to pre-process again. All you have to do is say, you know what, 10's not really working for me. Let's try 50. So hit 50, hit decimate. There we go. So we've brought this down from 300,000 points down to 141,000. Or I'm sorry, down to 25,000 active points actually. And you can see it maintained all of the detail that we needed, and then where it doesn't have a whole lot of detail, it gave me less geometry. Where it has more detail, it added more geometry. So that's one way you can like make your meshes a little bit more manageable. You can go through and you can decimate, and that's useful for things like 3D printing, or again, getting your file sizes manageable. But if you need to go through here and add geometry, if we go through here and turn on polyframe again, we can hold down Shift, and we can just add a little bit of local geo in here, and then go in here with our standard brush and just add on any detail that we want. And the reason why I use Shift to smooth this area first is that if you just go through here and you try and sculpt with your standard brush and you pick like this point here, it's not going to do anything because it doesn't have a vert to kind of tessellate. So if you go up here, it'll start tessellating this one. You can go down this edge here and you can start adding detail. But if you just want to sculpt across here, it's going to be a little spotty because there's no verts here for it. So if I want to put a big smile here, it's actually not doing anything. If I accidentally go over one of these lines, it's like, okay, it's starting to make a smile, but if I go out of polyframe mode, you're going to get kind of caps here. So essentially what it's doing is looking for verts to tessellate from. So that's why it might be a little easier just to kind of be like, hey, let me add a little geo to this general area, and then come back in here and do the sculpting that I want. Now let's go back, we'll drag our undo slider back to kind of where we were just messing around with this head here. And let's talk about a few more things that are different between Dynamesh and Sculptris Pro. And also, what we're talking about Sculptris Pro, let's go ahead and talk about the snake hook brushes because they are very useful, especially with Sculptris Pro. So again, we have BSH, which is our snake hook brush, and we can go through here and we can basically pull out, and you're going to see, go ahead and hit OK. If we go in here under brush modifiers, you can see our brush modifier is set to 0 on snake hook. What that means is it's going to basically follow my brush. I'm pulling out from this object, then it's just going to follow my brush out. I can change my camera view, but essentially it's going to follow my brush out. If I go to BS2, which is snake hook 2, you're going to see the brush modifier is set to 100. So now if I just kind of hover over my brush here, and if you just kind of wiggle on the object here, it's going to pull straight out towards your camera. So a multiplier of 100, it goes right towards the camera. So even if I pull out here, it's going to really want to follow my camera. Especially if you just kind of wiggle as you go, it's going to want to come towards the camera. You can split the difference. You can say, you know what, I want my brush control to be there a little bit and to follow my camera a little bit, so you can change that brush modifier to 50. But if you also want this to behave more like the brush snake hook and put it at 0, now it'll just follow the camera. So again, this is snake hook 2, and it'll come right at you towards the camera. If we do BSS, snake sphere, this is another really cool one for blocking out. So again, like we did before, if you just kind of pull, it'll just grab geometry, and you're going to see it's pulling more towards the camera. Let's go ahead and drop that down to 0. And now we can kind of use this as like an armature builder. So we can go through here and just kind of pull out, you know, a little bit of body parts here, go in here and just kind of create a little bit of a waist, pull out from the hips, pull down some legs here. So you can kind of go through here and just pull out some legs and some feet, and we can start blocking out a little bit of our character here. Of course, just like anything else, you want to make sure you're working in the round. And this is similar to like Z-sphere sketching and Z-sketching actually, which will be something that'll come in handy. But if you just want to use this as a way to kind of, you know, go through here and start sketching out parts here, that's a viable way to do it. Let's go ahead and undo here. Let's talk a little bit more about that smooth. So again, if we make our draw size very big, just tap S and make a draw size big, hold down Shift and start smoothing. It's going to make this geometry very smooth. However, we don't have any Z intensity. So we're going to go up here, let's turn that Z intensity, hold down Shift, turn that Z intensity back up to 100. And now when we shift and smooth, we can actually smooth pieces completely gone. You can smooth through pieces, and then you can go through here, of course, we can like re-pull out these arms here using our snake sphere. And you can smooth them back, and that'll go ahead and start making them skinnier. Now another feature, if you remember when we had Sculptris Pro off, and we wanted to go through here and we hold down Shift, and now our cursor's blue because we have Sculptris Pro off. We're going to hold down Shift to smooth, and I'm going to let go of Shift, and you're going to see it's just going to maintain our volumes and smooth that geometry over our volumes. If we have Sculptris Pro turned on and we hold down Shift to smooth, when we let go of Shift, it'll actually start inflating. So again, if you hold down Shift to smooth and go to the end here, you can start inflating out. So this is also kind of useful if you're using like BSH for your snake hook brush. You can kind of go through and you can use this to kind of pull out appendages, then to go back and smooth and let go of Shift as you're smoothing, and that'll go ahead and inflate. Again, another really easy way to kind of go through here and redistribute geometry and run a quick inflate. Of course, you can go back in here with your move brush. It'll temporarily gray out Sculptris Pro, change your proportions, change your pose a little bit, and we'll get in easier ways of pose when we get into masking, but for now I think that'll work for us. Now you're going to see I turned Dynamesh off, and if I go back over here and turn Dynamesh on, it's going to get rid of that tessellation and just re-Dynamesh my object at whatever resolution we have. So you can use Sculptris Pro together with Dynamesh. You can go through here and you can again go to BSH for a snake hook brush. We can pull pieces out, and as we're doing that, or you can use again any brush and go to BSA for spiral, so we can make very large spirals. And then as we get closer, we can make our brush size smaller, and we can hold down Alt and we can spiral the other way. And we can get closer in here even and make our brush even smaller, and we can hold down, we can just spiral the other way. So you're going to see we're getting more and more geometry, but we're able to use that spiral to continue getting more and more detail. And again, if you don't like that, just to make your draw size big, hold down Shift and just smooth it all away. Now if you want to see where your settings are, right now we're in brush settings, and brush does have some Sculptris Pro settings. So if we go over here to the brush menu and we open up the Sculptris Pro submenu, you're going to see it's enabled. If you turn that off, it disables it. So up here, it grays it out. It also says use global. What that means is if you go up here to the stroke menu underneath Sculptris Pro, these are your global settings. If you don't want it to use these, you can say turn off global, and then you can change these whatever you want for whatever brush you're using. So we'll go ahead and turn use global back on. And let's talk about these global settings. So if I go back to my standard brush, BSG, or by now probably using one of your hotkeys, you can go up here to stroke. And for example, you're going to see we have a subdivide size and an unsubdivide ratio. So what that basically means is when I go through here and I'm using, let's turn on polyframe again, and I'm using my standard brush, it's going to be at a certain resolution. And if I hold down shift to smooth, I didn't change my brush size, but if I hold down shift to smooth, you're going to see it tessellate slightly larger. That's your undivided ratio. So if we make that a little more obvious, let's go in here to stroke, set this undivided ratio to like, crank it out all the way to 3, and we hold down shift to smooth. Now it's going to smooth at a much lower density, but I'll sculpt at a higher density. So here's higher density sculpting, very much lower density smoothing. So if you like that effect, that's where you can dial that in. If you don't, if you want to make these the same, you can just hit 1, but by default it's 1.25. Another interesting thing is if we go through here, Sculptris Pro doesn't stick things together. So if we go back in here to BSH, and we take this chin here, and we kind of go through and kind of push it towards the body, and let's go into our inflate brush. I'm going to inflate all of this together. So now we have these chin pods going into his body here. Now I know if I have Dynamesh on, so if I turn on polyframe here and I control drag, now those are Dynamesh together. It basically made an envelope, so when I go through here and smooth, those are stuck together. If I undo that, in fact, let's undo all the way back so we can kind of do this again. Let's go to BSH. Again, we'll pull down some little feelers, and we'll go in here with our inflate brush, and we'll put this geometry together. Now, instead of using Dynamesh, if I hold down Shift and I smooth, you're going to see these always stay separate. I actually smooth those apart, but these two meshes aren't connected. Dynamesh will connect them, Sculptris Pro won't. So again, if I go to BSH and I drag these in, and then I go to inflate, these things will never be stuck together if I'm only using Sculptris Pro. However, if I control drag to Dynamesh, or I turn Dynamesh on if it's off, now they will be stuck together. So just something to keep in mind as you're using that. But again, let's go ahead and drag back. So we got this guy kind of masked out here. We've pulled out some arms, pulled out some shoulders, used our move brush. And again, you can use Sculptris Pro in combination with Dynamesh, or you can use Sculptris Pro to like maybe pull out some appendages and then turn Sculptris Pro back off. If I ever want quick access to it, like, oh, my move brush has it grayed out and I can't turn it off, I just hold down Shift. It'll allow me to go up here again. I can turn it off there, and now it's completely off globally. So now I can go through here, and I can go back to just using my Dynamesh to maybe pull out a rib cage. Control drag to re-Dynamesh, and then pull the body back here. And again, if I want to, I can go and grab my clay brush, continue blocking the character out as needed. Maybe use our Damien standard brush to carve in a little bit of the spine, maybe use my standard brush to go through here. Maybe use our clay buildup brush to put in some of these muscles here. So again, very quickly and easily you can go through here with the basic brushes you have and start modifying these volumes, coming back in, using your move brush, pinch brush, standard brush, clay buildup brush, whatever you need to go through and get the job done.
I'm going to tack this on the end here because there was a small update to some of the brushes here. So in case we're not going to get into curves for a bit, but you can actually attach a curve to any brush. And in fact, if you go in here to, if you're in ZBrush 2021.6 or later, you can go in here to B to open up your brush menu, S to narrow it down to the S brushes, now you're going to see we have Snake Curve 2, Snake Curve 4, and Snake Curve 5. And then essentially all that is it's going to tell you if you choose any of them, go ahead and turn on Sculptris Pro. So we'll say, okay, we'll go up here, turn on Sculptris Pro, and now you're going to actually drag out a curve, and then you can pull out from that curve a Sculptris Pro, and it'll do some really neat stuff. If you want to take a deep dive in that, you can go to my YouTube playlist tab right here, and here's the ZBrush 2021 what's new. Of course, there's ZBrush 2019, 2020, 2018, all that stuff. You can go in here and see all the new updates. If you want to take a deep dive in this particular feature, just scroll all the way down until you get to 2021.6, and you can read all about the new curve snake brushes. Of course, you can also go on my ArtStation page, and then in here it's a little bit nicer to look at. So here you can see, ZBrush 2021, what's new. Here's 2021.6. Here's the 10 videos. You can go right in here, click on here, and it takes you right to the new 2021.6 videos. But anyway, long story short, there are curves you can attach to a surface, and then you can click and pull on those curves. And again, with Sculptris Pro turned on, you're going to see it's going to tessellate on the fly. Another update that happened in 2021.5. And again, you can go right in here and say, ZBrush 2021.5, what's new? And boom, there you go. Here's the 2021.5 in that playlist. Essentially all that does, well, not all it does, it's a cool thing. You can go through here, you can hold down Control-Shift, and we can switch over to Select Lasso, and you can use visibility to hide pieces of your mesh, but you can still use Sculptris Pro. So if we go in here and we do, let's do BSH for our snake hook brush, you're going to see even with a piece of our mesh hidden, we can still utilize Sculptris Pro. So you can actually use this to your advantage in certain instances where if we go through here and we turn on like brush menu, auto masking, if you turn on backface mask, it's going to, hide. It's not going to let Sculptris Pro work. It's going to say, hey, auto masking is going to say Sculptris Pro won't work for you. However, what you can do is you can go in here, turn off backface masking. We can have Sculptris Pro turned on, and then you can just use your visibility. Let's hold down Control-Shift, go to Select Rectangle, hold down Control-Shift and then Alt, and then we'll just hide those faces. And now you can have essentially what is backface masking with Sculptris Pro turned on without it yelling at you.